Series options CS/390 and series options. 3.2 options controlling the kind of output. Compilation can involve up to 4 stages: pre-processing, compilation proper, assembly, and linking, always in that order. GCC is capable of pre-processing and compiling several files, either into several assembler input files or into one assembler input file. Then each assembler input file produces an object file, and linking combines all the object files, those newly compiled, and those specified as input, into an executable file. For any given input file, the file name suffix determines what kind of compilation is done. File CC source code that must be preprocessed. File IC source code that should not be preprocessed. File to C++ source code that should not be preprocessed. File M Objective-C source code. Note that you must link with the libobj library to make an Objective-C program work. File me Objective-C source code that should not be preprocessed. File M Objective-C++ source code. Note that you must link with the libobj library to make an Objective-C++ program work. Note that M refers to a literal capital M. Chapter 3 GCC, Command Options 33. File MI, File H. File CC, File CP, File CXX, File CPP, File CPP, File C++, File C. File M, File M. File MI. File HH, File H, File H, File HP, File HXX, File HPP, File HPP, File H++, File TCC. File F, File for File FT, and File Phi. File F, File for File FPP, File FPP, File FTN. File F90, File F95, File F03, File F08, File Phi. File F90, File F95, File F03, File F08. Objective-C++ source code that should not be preprocessed. C++, Objective-C, or Objective-C++ header file to be turned into a precompiled header, default, or C++ header file to be turned into an ADA-spec via dump ADA-spec switch. C++ source code that must be preprocessed. Note that in .cxx, the last 2 letters must both be literally X. Likewise, C refers to a literal capital C. Objective-C++ source code that must be preprocessed. Objective-C++ source code that should not be preprocessed. C++ header file to be turned into a precompiled header or ADA-spec. Fixed-form Fortran source code that should not be preprocessed. Fixed-form Fortran source code that must be preprocessed with the traditional preprocessor. Free-form Fortran source code that should not be preprocessed. Free-form Fortran source code that must be preprocessed with the traditional preprocessor. 34. Using the GNU compiler collection, GCC. File Go source code. File DD source code. File DD interface file. File DDD documentation code doc. File as ADA source code file that contains a library unit declaration, a declaration of a package, subprogram, or generic instantiation, or library unit renaming declaration, a package, generic, or subprogram renaming declaration. Such files are also called specs. File ADB ADA source code file containing a library unit body, a subprogram, or package body. Such files are also called bodies. Files S assembler code. File S. File SX assembler code that must be preprocessed. Other an object file to be fed straight into linking. Any file name with no recognized suffix is treated this way. You can specify the input language explicitly with the X option. X language specify explicitly the language for the following input files, rather than letting the compiler choose a default based on the file name suffix. This option applies to all following input files until the next X option. Possible values for language are X none, CC header output C++, C++ header C++, system header C++, user header C++, CPP output Objective-C header Objective-C CPP output Objective-C++ Objective-C++ header Objective-C US plus CPP output. Assembler with ADA DF77 F77 CPP input F95 CPP input Go. Turn off any specification of a language, so that subsequent files are handled according to their file name suffixes, as they are if X has not been used at all. If you only want some of the stages of compilation, you can use X or file name suffixes to tell GCC where to start, and one of the options CS, or E to say where GCC is to stop. Note that some combinations, for example, XCPP output E instruct GCC to do nothing at all. C compile or assemble the source files, but do not link. The linking stage simply is not done. The ultimate output is in the form of an object file for each source file. By default, the object file name for a source file is made by replacing the suffix .c, .s, etc. with O. Unrecognized input files, not requiring compilation or assembly, are ignored.